So for anyone that doesn't know, my name is Will Squires. I'm co-founder of gcCrescendo, and I'd like to introduce you to Dr. John Blakey. John is one of the UK's leading CEO executive coaches and the founder of the Trusted Executive. He assists CEOs who aspire to be a force for good. He's a former international managing director of a FTSE 100 company. John's got a wealth of experience coaching over 130 CEOs from 22 different countries, including top executives, prominent public figures, and also some of the UK's most accomplished entrepreneurs. His experience extends to coaching leaders of gold medal winning Team GB teams, championship winning Premier League football clubs, and also the coach of England cricket team. So that's John. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Will. Great to be here.
For those that aren't yet members or aware of gcCrescendo, I'll briefly introduce the community to you. We're a community of purpose-driven founders. Our mission is to bring together the people that want to change the world so that we can do good faster. We've got a subscription-based community where you can get access to other like-minded entrepreneurs, get real-time legal and business strategy guidance, access to content, and come along to these kind of events that we're running. So please check out our website. We'll put that in the chat. So today we're going to be talking to John about being a purpose-driven leader. I'm going to ask John a few questions to get things going, and then if you've got any questions, please do pop them in the chat and we'll follow up with them later in the session. So let's get going, John. So first question, number one. So you published a book, as I mentioned, The Trusted Executive, back in 2016. So it's almost 8 years ago now. So how do you think the field of purpose-driven leadership has changed since then?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks, Will, for that introduction. And yeah, how have things changed since 2016? When I published my last book, Trusted Executive, I was seen as the madman from the hills who was predicting that the triple bottom line would become a real thing in the coming years. And I sat in front of a lot of CEOs with their arms crossed, stubbornly resisting the tide of change. And yeah, a lot has changed since 2016. First thing, gcCrescendo and similar networks did not exist in 2016. And I think that's also immediately a sign of how things are changing. But I just want to share a slide which will also give you another way of thinking about how things are changing, because money talks in purpose-driven leadership as much as it does anywhere. And this is a graph showing you the assets, the total assets under management of ESG funds, so environmental, social, and governance funds, which many of us will know has been a trend, which back in 2016, how many people had even heard of the acronym ESG? And yet today we find that there are trillions of dollars of assets pouring into ESG funds. And the prediction is that that trend will continue into the future. So the money folk are backing the purpose-driven movement as much as anybody else. And maybe the final thing that's changed that I would highlight is that, again, back in 2016, I think the first B Corp was registered in the UK in 2015. And B Corp, as again, many of you will know, is a community of business leaders whose mission is to use business as a force for good. And you can certify your business as a B Corp. There are now over 1,500 B Corps in the UK. It's a rapidly growing movement. It's a global movement. So all of these signs are giving you and giving me the impression that this is not about predicting something that is coming. This is about something that's already here. And really, that's the starting point in 2023. I think this isn't now a madman from the hills. This is a practical challenge because this is a very real phenomenon that we have in the business world.
So I guess that's why you've put together your new book, John, taking kind of that change. So you're your new book, Force for Good: How to Thrive as a Purpose-Driven Leader, is that focusing on that transition, or is it picking up on other things as well?
Yeah, again, just a couple of slides to share on this. Bear with me. Yeah, so I'm very excited actually today because this webinar is the first public airing of the content from my new book, which comes out in August. So yeah, the starting point of Force for Good is not, this isn't a book about do you want to become a purpose-driven leader? Is that a choice that you're ready to make? This book assumes you've already made that choice, that you've already crossed that threshold. You are living the life of a purpose-driven leader. And if you are living that life, and it's a life that I've lived for a number of years, my experience is that the demands and expectations on you as a purpose-driven leader are very different from the demands and expectations on you as a profit-driven leader, for example. And I think that leaders, purpose-driven leaders, need to be equipped with new tools, new skills that allows them to stay authentic, resilient, and motivated as purpose-driven leaders. So that's very much the premise of the new book. And one of the inspirations for the title of the new book, partly it's a B Corp reference to talk about Force for Good, but it's also a reference to a North American Indian parable, the parable about the two wolves. And if I just can share with you that parable, this is a conversation between a grandfather and a granddaughter. And the grandfather says to the granddaughter, I have a fight going on inside of me. It's taking place between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The grandfather looked at the granddaughter and went on, the other wolf embodies positive emotions. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. Both wolves are fighting to the death. The same fight is happening inside you and every person too. The granddaughter took a moment to reflect on this. At last, she looked up at her grandfather and asked, which wolf will win? The old man gave a simple reply, the one you feed. And so the premise of Force for Good is that inside each leader is a force for good and a force for bad. Which one will win? The one you feed. And this new book is really about providing a diet to help leaders who want to be a force for good. And it doesn't assume that that's a given, that just because you become a B Corp for every day the rest of your life, you're going to be a leader who's a force for good. No, it's a constant work. It's a constant discipline. Which one wins? The one you feed.
I think that's great, John. I think the thing that our founders will be interested in, obviously there's tons and tons of challenges being an entrepreneur anyway, but being a purpose-driven entrepreneur, what kind of challenges do you think they face over and above profit-driven entrepreneur? And also, I know you mentioned in your book the up, in, and out model. I don't know if you can kind of refer to that in this answer as well.
Sure. So yeah, I'm a big fan of models. There was a model in my previous book, The Trusted Executive. There's a model in this book. I think models give us a language to talk about things and have better conversations. And the model that I'm introducing in this book, I refer to as the up, in, and out of purpose-driven leadership. And if we want to feed the good wolf, then it's these dimensions, these three dimensions that I think leaders need to pay particular attention to. So the up, what is the upper purpose-driven leadership? It's the challenge of how do I discover, connect with, serve, and feel the joy of my higher calling. So if you are a force for good and there is some good that you're standing for, there is some purpose that you're pursuing, how do you discover that? How do you connect with it and stay connected with it? And how do you feel the joy of that, particularly when the going gets tough? Then the in of purpose-driven leadership. How do you manage your motivation, your resilience, and your well-being whilst pursuing that higher purpose? Because I think the moment that you step into a moral position and declare your leadership or your business as a force for good, you will come under different scrutiny than you ever came under when your business was a profit-driven business. I've had that experience myself in leading a not-for-profit. The way people assess my leadership, the way people judge the business is subtly different because I've staked out some moral high ground. And there are people who are going to think that you're a false prophet. So you have to be, I think, work on that in of purpose-driven leadership if you're going to sustain the motivation, the resilience on that path. And finally, the out of purpose-driven leadership. How do you lead your followers in a purpose-driven organization? And in this aspect of the model, I look at actually look at the concept of what happens when things go wrong, particularly when individuals make mistakes. How do we handle that in a purpose-driven organization? How do we handle that aspect of caring for individuals while still protecting the team and the purpose of the mission? Because again, if we're standing for certain ethics, standing for certain morals and the way we deal with each other, but how do we do that whilst also protecting the integrity of the team and making progress towards the mission? And I think there are some dilemmas on that path for a lot of leaders. So in the book, I go into a lot more detail on each of these components, and I share a number of tools and techniques and exercises that I've worked with and with my clients as a coach to help them achieve these different aspects that I've been talking about, because I think all of them are habits. It's habits of behavior that as purpose-driven leaders, we need to get better and better at if we're going to have that authenticity, have that motivation, and stay the long haul of achieving a significant purpose.
Do you find that, John, with your CEOs and your founders that you coach, do you find that it kind of waxes and wanes, the motivation kind of goes up and down for being a purpose-driven leader, or is it everyone's very much focused and then they never stop?
No, it's very much the form. I mean, I work with leaders in a confidential environment, so I get to hear what they really think and how they really feel. And what I notice with purpose-driven leadership is that there is a big rush of enthusiasm around the decision to make this choice, around the decision to become a B Corp, around the decision to stand for something in the world. And there's a lot of emotion and passion that fuels that choice. And then I think there's a bit of a honeymoon period as everybody sort of basks in that early passion. But I think as reality dawns on leaders and as they face the expectations of their various stakeholders, having declared this purpose, I think that's when it hits that actually this is a tough job and this is a different job to other types of leadership. I mean, I come from a profit-driven world. The rules of the game were very clear. We might not now think that they're appropriate to a 21st century environment, but at the time, it was well established, it was well drilled, everybody knew what was expected of you, and you know, the rules were pretty clear. I think in the purpose-driven world, we're still creating, we're still working out how this is going to happen, how we will work, how we will sustain that. And I think that's challenging. I think it's a creative task, it's an exciting task, but I don't think we should underestimate how much resilience and fortitude purpose-driven leaders need as they go down this path.
We've had a question coming from John Gillett here. Thanks, John. John said, I agree with your parable and the force of good requires constant feeding, which is what we just talked about. However, it makes it sound hard, but if it's a fundamental pillar of the business, e.g. as with a B Corp business, surely this makes it easier as not just leader driven.
Yes, I think that's true. I think if everybody in the organization is part of that choice to, for example, become a B Corp, and if you've declared that visibly and you've been assessed transparently around those criteria, I think that definitely helps the leader, because there's no ambiguity then, is there? There's clarity about purpose and about systems and processes. But even there, and some of the B Corp leaders that I've spoken to, that's again a great starting point, but there's still a lot more that comes beyond that. And some B Corps now are being scrutinized maybe unscrupulously, because obviously the media and certain stakeholders wants to find the chink. They want to find that it's just greenwashing, or they want to find that it's, you know, this aspiration is idealistic, but it's not actually practical. So there are people out there who are wanting to trip this movement up, and you know, if you're working in an environment like that, you need to be pretty savvy in terms of how you're going to handle that scrutiny and the impact it has on you when you're the media headline, you know, when you're the one that's being accused of XYZ, and it's unfair and it's not true. But you as a leader have got to work out how you're going to sleep at night when some of that stuff might be circulating around you because you've become a high profile B Corp brand.
I think the other thing, I mean, if anyone's got any other questions, please do jump in. I mean, I've got quite a few. One of the things that springs to mind is, so, you know, our title of this is How Do You Thrive? Are there particular things that you found in your experience with these leaders that does help them thrive and does maybe turn the dial on the business and on the mindset?
Yeah, well, one of the things, Will, that's very pertinent to this webinar is being in a network of like-minded leaders. Incredibly valuable, because being in a great community is different from being in a great team. And sometimes I talk about community and people say, oh, you mean, you know, am I part of a great team? No, I don't mean that. Are you part of a great community? You know, and what communities do you spend time in? Because it's in like-minded communities where you can be refreshed and recharged. You know, there's a practical value in terms of picking up best practice, but a lot of it to me is more emotional and spiritual, around just believing that you're not alone, believing that there are people who are equally passionate as you about moving in a certain direction beyond one business, you know, but as part of a broader movement that is genuinely seeking to move the dial around some big global issues. So I think community is one of the things I'm really, you know, obviously gcCrescendo, great to see that popping up as a community, because I think there is a need for it. And I would certainly encourage purpose-driven leaders to seek out communities like that and to prioritize time and energy to put into those communities, because it can make the difference between sustaining the journey versus giving up halfway through. And, you know, that's not what we want.
Well, that's, yeah, great to hear. I mean, that's something that we're obviously really passionate about and we think is really important. And also it's going to be difficult. So you need that support of people, even if you don't know them personally very well, of people that are trying to achieve the same thing, which is great. Steve, you've got a question. If you want to unmute Steve, we can have it live if you'd like to jump on.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Nice to meet you, John.
Yeah, hi Steve.
I'll try and keep it quite brief, but my company Envelo, we help manage indoor air, health and wellbeing, productivity, and energy efficiency. So purpose driven is really core actually to what we seek to do, but it does have things like cost savings attached to it as well from the energy efficiency point of view. I think the challenge we have is that purpose driven hasn't yet found its way into the way companies procure, the way budgets are set, etc. So we end up, in terms of getting sales going, we start sort of purpose driven, but we end up in what, you know, how much money can you save conversations every time. So I don't know if there's an easy answer to this, but it you know, there's a big education piece to sort of show what can be done and, you know, why it's important, and B Corp and things like that are really key as parts of it. But I suppose my question really is, you know, any sort of tips around how to help accelerate things where, you know, we need to get sales going. So being purpose driven is great, it really works for us, but we need to get sales going, and there's all these sort of practical obstacles in the way to get there.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for your question, Steve. Yeah, it's interesting when we talk about purpose driven, and maybe we immediately assume that means that profit isn't important. But I don't necessarily look at it that way. I think profit and commercial disciplines are still just as important in a purpose-driven world. But it's about that being the fuel, the profit being the fuel to power a purpose. Because if you haven't got the fuel, you're not going to achieve anything. So we need the fuel, we need the profit, but we're saying profit is the means to something rather than the end in itself. So I think one of the things that purpose-driven leaders need to hold the tension around, and it sounds like this is what you are doing, is you have to hold the tension between commercial realities and being good at the stuff you need to be good at, for example, selling and knowing what the buyer, what their needs are, how you meet those immediate needs, as well as staying authentic to your purpose and your values. So I think that's a good example of where you have to walk both paths. Whereas if you're a profit-driven organization, you haven't declared this purpose-driven mission, then you don't really have to worry about the other part. So I think it's more difficult, and what you're describing is more difficult as purpose-driven leader, because you have to play both games. You have to be good at what you do at a commercial level. You have to meet today's reality head on, but you still have to hold true to that future vision and that future purpose. And over time, the balance is going to change, isn't it? Your buyers are going to prioritize different things at different times. Sometimes purpose will become more important to them. Sometimes a more immediate commercial need will be more important to them. And we have to be agile to sort of respond to that, and also help our teams embrace all of that. Because again, people who want to work for purpose-driven organizations, B Corp organizations, we love that passion, but we also need the talent that allows us to do great business. And we need people to be comfortable at a values level that business and the business disciplines are important, and that's part of what we're here for. But we want to put it into the context of achieving this bigger purpose. So I hope that helps, Steve. It's not a specific detailed answer, but hopefully it's just giving you that context in terms of how we need to talk about some of those challenges.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
I had a similar discussion, actually, just jumping in on that, with a founder whose all of her suppliers are purpose-driven. So she's kind of built a community of suppliers that she approves, which are purpose-driven business. I don't know that that's something obviously into the future that will permeate other industries, but
yeah,
her industry specifically was that was already happening. But is that something you're seeing more and more of, John?
Well, it's early days, I think, in that respect. But, we talked about how much has changed between 2016 and 2023. And if you look forward to 2030, I think definitely you will see communities of businesses starting to collaborate in the value chain, who are aligned around purpose. And once you get to that sort of critical mass in a market, you can influence things in a different way. But I think that's a little bit of a way off. I mean, what I'd love to see in like 15 years' time is that not being a B Corp is almost like a black market, that it's still there, but it's like ostracized socially. That there has been sufficient sort of movement in this direction that it's considered to be normal to be a B Corp or akin to a B Corp. And that anything less than that is really a black market.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just looking at the time. We've actually only got 2 minutes left. So if anyone's got any other questions, please jump in, and we'll try and get them answered. But we can follow up. We'll follow up with more details about John, more details about gcCrescendo for you guys, so you can have a look at what we're doing and check out our community. We're doing a free trial, so if you'd like to join and see what the community has to offer, then do come and have a look. Thanks, John. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. I think it's been really interesting, and I hope everyone else has found it interesting today. And so without any further questions coming through, I look forward to seeing you guys all soon at the next event. We'll be posting them on Eventbrite and also on the network. So if anyone wants to come along to those, then please do. But I just want to say thanks, John, and thanks everyone for coming along.